The drive from Columbus took 2 hours, and Iris Holt used every mile of it to read the grant brief again on her phone, propped against the steering wheel in the stretches where the road ran straight. The Millhaven Postal Heritage Center. Uncatalogued World War II correspondence, possibly significant, almost certainly fragile. Her university's Rare Documents program had been chasing collections like this for 3 years, and her director had given her 4 days to assess it, write a recommendation, and be back in time for Thursday's faculty meeting. She pulled into the gravel lot beside a 2-story brick building that had once been the town's main sorting facility, noted the peeling paint on the window casings and the hand-lettered sign above the door, and decided she could probably wrap this in 2. She had wrapped harder assessments in less. A man was loading archive boxes onto a flatbed cart near the side door. He had grease on the cuff of one sleeve and a lanyard clipped to his shirt pocket, and he looked up when she got out of the car with her leather bag and her cotton gloves already in hand. She put him at early 30s. He had the kind of stillness that usually belonged to men who worked outdoors, unhurried, taking up no extra space. "Dr. Holt," he said. Director Paulson called ahead. "She had a family thing this morning, she's sorry she isn't here." "I'm Cal." Iris shook his hand and looked past him toward the door. "Is there someone else on staff who can walk me through the catalog system?" "I can do that." She nodded, the kind of nod that moves past a person, and followed him inside. The reading room smelled of old paper and something faintly mineral, the river, maybe, or just the building's age. Cal had set up the central table with 2 pairs of gloves and a foam book cradle, and Iris noticed he'd also placed a small portable hygrometer near the window and angled it so she could read the display from the chair. She hadn't mentioned humidity controls in the grant inquiry. She hadn't mentioned cotton gloves either. She filed both observations away without changing her assessment of him. "The World War II collection is in boxes 4 through 11, he said, pulling the first archival flat from the cart. "Letters from a single correspondent, 1944 to 45. 43 letters total, plus some ephemera. Director Paulson thinks they've been here since the mid-70s, donated anonymously. No provenance on file." "Then that's where we start." Iris set her bag down, pulled on her gloves, and reached for the flat. Cal said, "Left corner," the bindings lifted on that side. She adjusted her grip without comment and lifted the cover. The letters were immaculate. That was the first thing she noticed, not their age, not their content, but the condition. 40-plus-year-old paper in a regional archive that probably ran on a shoestring, and the letters looked as though they'd been handled by a conservator. The edges were reinforced with Japanese tissue. The folds were supported. There was no foxing, no tide marking from old humidity damage, only the natural ivory deepening of good wartime paper. "Who conserved these?" she said. "I did. Mostly." Cal had moved to the far end of the table and was making a note in a logbook. "Over about 4 years." Iris looked up. She put a question in her expression but didn't ask it. She went back to the letters. The correspondent signed each one the same way, "Your Edmund." The handwriting was careful and upright, the letters of a man who'd learned penmanship in a better school than the army, and the prose was plain and specific, the weight of his pack, the color of the mud outside Metz, the particular sound a mess hall made at 0500 when the men were still half asleep and no one had spoken yet. There was nothing heroic in the telling, no drama of the kind that filled the published memoirs. There was only a man trying to make his wife see exactly where he was standing so that the distance might feel smaller. Iris worked through the first 30 letters in 2 hours. Cal brought her coffee without being asked, set it at the corner of the table where it wouldn't threaten the documents, and went back to his logbook. He answered her questions precisely and without elaboration. When she asked about the anonymous donor, he said he didn't know. When she asked whether the collection had been formally identified, the correspondent's full name, the regiment, the recipient, he said no, not formally. She moved to letter 31. The envelope was slightly thicker than the others. She lifted the flap with care and drew out 2 sheets, and between them, pressed flat, was a wildflower, or what had been one. It was the color of old straw now, its petals still faintly shaped, tucked between the pages as precisely as if someone had meant to keep it. She set it aside and unfolded the letter, and that was when she saw the marginal note. It ran along the left side of the second sheet in a different hand, a woman's, smaller and rounder than Edmund's upright script, written in pencil so light it was almost invisible. 3 lines. Iris leaned in. She had spent 2 years corresponding with a colleague at the National Archives about a fragment of authenticated wartime bride's response script, a handwriting sample from a woman who had written back to World War II frontline letters in the margins of the letters themselves rather than composing separate replies. The fragment was known in the field. The hand had never been traced to a collection. This was the hand. Iris sat back in her chair. She looked at the letter for a long moment. Then she looked at Cal, who had not moved, who was still at the far end of the table with his logbook, writing something in a small and careful script. She said, "Do you know whose handwriting this is?" "In the margin." He set his pen down. He looked at the letter from where he stood. He didn't come closer, as if he'd seen it before, as if he was letting her look at it for as long as she needed. "That's my grandmother's," he said. "Clara." The room was very quiet. The hygrometer ticked. Iris said, "And Edmund." "My grandfather. Corporal Edmund Merritt. 3rd Army, 12 Corps. He came home in March of '45. Cal paused. "She was already pregnant with my father when she wrote that." Iris looked at the logbook at his end of the table. She could read, from where she sat, the name on the cover. Asterisk Conservation Record, E.A. Merritt Collection. C. Merritt, Conservator, asterisk. She said, "You've known the whole time." "Since I was about 8. He came around the table and stood beside her, looking down at the letter. "My grandmother donated them after my grandfather died. She wanted them somewhere they'd be kept. She didn't want a fuss." He turned the logbook so Iris could read the first page. "When I found out where they'd ended up, I asked Director Paulson if I could work on them. I studied paper conservation for a couple of years before I stopped. I knew what they needed." Iris opened the logbook. The entries went back 4 years. Every letter documented, every repair recorded, the tissue, the humidity targets, the rehousing process. The handwriting in the logbook was the same small, careful script she'd been watching him use all morning. She said, "You left the program. My wife got sick. Then she died." He said it without self-pity, just the plain shape of it. "My daughter was 6. Iris closed the logbook and looked at the 43 letters in their careful housings and the pressed flower on its sheet of glassine and the 3 penciled lines in Clara Merritt's hand. She said, "This collection, I need to tell you what it is. Formally. You don't have to. I want to." She turned to face him. "The correspondence is exceptional on its own, the prose, the span, the condition. But the marginal responses make it something scholars have been looking for 20 years. The bride's response fragment. Your grandmother is in the record, Mr. Merritt. Academically. She's been in it. Nobody just hadn't found her yet." Cal nodded slowly. He picked up his coffee mug, which was empty, and held it anyway. "What happens now?" he said. "I write my recommendation. The university will want to endow the archive and digitize the full collection. We'll name it." She looked at the letter. "The Edmund and Clara Merritt Collection. That's not negotiable, as far as I'm concerned." He was quiet. In the window behind him, the river moved in the late afternoon light. "And I'd like to propose," Iris said, "that you co-cure it. Formally. You know every letter. You know the family. You know conservation." She paused. "We can work around whatever your situation is." "My situation," he said, almost to himself. Then, more quietly, her name was Annie. Before Iris could answer, the front door opened. A girl came in at a dead run, backpack bouncing, and stopped when she saw Iris the way children stop when they encounter an unexpected adult, a full second of assessment, head tilted. "Dad." She set her backpack down on the nearest chair with the authority of someone who had done this every afternoon for as long as she could remember. "Who's this?" "This is Dr. Holt. She came to look at your great-grandfather's letters." The girl, 9 years old, dark-eyed, her father's stillness already in her bearing, turned to the table. She looked at the letters laid out on their foam cradles, at the pressed flower on its glassine, at Iris's cotton gloves. Then she looked at Iris. "Have you read them all?" she said. "Most of them." 31. 31's the one with the flower." She said it matter-of-factly, as if this were well established. Grandma Clara put that in when she mailed it back. She kept all the letters and mailed them back to Great-Grandpa Edmund after the war so he'd have them. Dad told me. Iris looked at Cal. He hadn't told her that. She mailed them back, Iris said. All 43. He set his mug down. She said she wanted him to know she'd read every word. Lena had moved to the end of the table and was looking at the last letter in the sequence, number 43, the one Cal had not yet reached in his rehousing. She didn't touch it. She looked at it the way her father looked at things, with a care that seemed instinctive. That's his last one, she said. Do you want me to read it? Iris said, yes. Lena looked at her father. He nodded. She picked up the letter by its edges, the way she'd been taught, and read in a clear and steady voice. Clara, I am writing this on the ship and the water is very flat and I keep thinking about the drive home from the station, which I have planned entirely, including where I will stop for gas and what I will say when I see you. I have decided I will not say anything at all. I think you will understand. All my love, your Edmund. The reading room held the silence that follows something true. Iris looked at the window. The river moved in the late afternoon light, indifferent and steady, the way rivers are. She thought of Edmund on that ship, watching flat water and rehearsing a drive home. She thought of Clara, mailing 43 letters back across the Atlantic, packing each one with the same careful hands that had tucked a wildflower into letter 31. Cal said, she understood. Lena set the letter down carefully on its cradle and looked up. Are you staying for dinner? She said to Iris. Dad makes chicken on Thursdays. Iris opened her mouth to say she had a hotel. She thought of her grant brief and her director and Thursday's faculty meeting, and then she thought of Clara Merritt mailing 43 letters back across the Atlantic so her husband would know she had read every word. Yes, she said. I'd like that. She stayed 3 hours. Lena showed her a shoebox of photographs, Edmund in his uniform, Clara in a print dress outside a house that was not much different from the house Iris had parked in front of that morning, and Cal made coffee again and talked about the conservation work the way a person talks about something they love without knowing they love it, with precision and without performance. When she left, she sat in her car for a moment in the dark gravel lot and looked at the light in the reading room window. 6 weeks later, she drove back. She hadn't called ahead. She wasn't sure what she'd meant to say. She pulled into the lot and Cal was on the loading dock, moving a cart, and he saw her before she got out of the car. He raised one hand. He didn't look surprised. Lena must have heard the car, because by the time Iris reached the door, a third coffee cup was already on the kitchen table. It was Lena who'd put it there. She did it the same way Clara Merritt had mailed 43 letters back across the ocean, without hesitation, without calculation, because some things are simply understood. Iris sat down. The river moved beyond the window, flat and easy and unhurried, carrying everything forward.